It's the real news. I'm Aaron Mate. The death toll from a Taliban assault on the Afghan city of Ghazni has passed 300. U.S. warplanes have reportedly killed dozens of Taliban fighters in a series of air raids in support of Afghan forces. The fighting in Ghazni has cast doubt on the prospects for peace talks to end Afghanistan's nearly 17-year war. Just last month, the U.S.-led coalition said it's prepared to speak to the Taliban.
And our Secretary of State, Mr. Pompeo, has said that we, the United States, are ready to talk with the Taliban and discuss the role of international forces. And we hope that they realize this and that this will help to move the peace process forward.
Joining me is Ahmed Rashid, journalist and best-selling author. Welcome, Ahmed. If we could start with what's happening in Ghazni, what do you see as the goal of this Taliban offensive on the city, and what have you learned so far about what is taking place? There are reports of bodies in the streets, massive suffering as this fighting intensifies.
Well, I think those reports are accurate, and it's a terrible situation. There's only one hospital in Ghazni, and it's overwhelmed and overloaded with wounded. The dead are being brought to the hospital as well. It's a very, very critical situation. This is the fourth day of fighting, and clearly the government forces and reinforcements that have arrived there have still not been able to clear the city of the Taliban. Clearly, you know, this Taliban attack, I mean, is nothing unusual. Firstly, there have been 4 attempts in the last year or so of the Taliban trying to capture a provincial capital. Ghazni is the provincial capital of the province of Ghazni, and the importance of Ghazni is that it's just less than 100 kilometers from Kabul, and it straddles the key road between Kabul and Kandahar. Capturing this and blocking all the roads would really lock up the country, because you wouldn't have access to the south and the north. Now, there have been attempts before to capture Kunduz in the north and Faryab in the west. Just 3-4 months ago, we saw such attempts. But I don't think we've seen first of all, such a coordinated attack. Remember, there are 3 or 4 major offensives going on by the Taliban, apart from Ghazni, in other parts of the country. And secondly, we haven't seen this kind of Taliban manpower in the field before. There are several thousand Taliban involved in these simultaneous attacks.
So what is the meaning of this? Following reports that there has been a reversal in U.S. policy. Just last month, it emerged that, according to credible sources reported by the New York Times, that U.S. representatives have met face-to-face for the first time with Taliban representatives. So does this attack signal to you that the Taliban is not interested in peace talks, or is it perhaps possibly trying to increase its leverage in any future discussions?
It should have been clear to the Afghan government and to the Americans that clearly before any peace talks, or even before the next ceasefire, which is scheduled to be carried out on August 22nd, when there's a religious festival, the Taliban would launch attacks and try and improve their military position. And that's exactly what they're doing. They're trying to strengthen and outsmart the government and the Americans in improving their military situation. They may have taken a lot of losses, but they've also shattered morale in the Afghan army and possibly in the international community as well. This attack is going to lead to a lot more countries and outsiders saying we should just give up on Afghanistan. Now, I think so the real crisis is that the government seemed unaware that such an attack would come, whereas I think everywhere that there are peace talks, there's talking and fighting goes on at the same time. And I think the Americans and the government should have prepared the armed forces, the country, the population for just such an attack. And it never happened, unfortunately. President Ashraf Ghani was taken by complete surprise, and it's taken 2 days or more for him to realize how serious the situation is in Ghazni.
So what does that apparent lack of readiness and awareness tell you then about the state of Ashraf Ghani's government and of the U.S.-led military coalition now, as I said, approaching the 17th year of this war?
Well, I think, on the government side, there seems to be total chaos. And some of the stories coming out of even the reinforcements being sent from Kabul to Ghazni, they speak of complete chaos and the government really not knowing what they're doing. And as I said before, they should have been prepared for just such an attack. Unfortunately, I think the intelligence on the military side is also obviously very poor. How did 2,000 to 3,000 Taliban amass outside Ghazni without some kind of pre-warning or without raising the awareness of the intelligence, both American intelligence and Afghan government intelligence? And I mean, what we've seen is there's been a huge failure on all sides. And subsequently, of course, there have been other huge attacks with hundreds of Taliban massing in other parts of the country to attack their targets. And there seems to have been no pre-warning, no intelligence about the fact that so many Taliban, I mean, my own estimate is that perhaps in this offensive, you've got between 3,000 to 5,000 Taliban involved. Imagine the supply lines, the ammunition, the food, all the bits and pieces of a military offensive, and there seems to have been no awareness that this was coming.
If there are peace talks, do you think that the Afghan and U.S. governments are possibly resigning themselves to a strategy of basically trying to keep control of the major urban centers and then effectively conceding the rural provincial areas to the Taliban?
Well, I think that policy has been very active for quite some time, many months, I would say. Ever since last year, when the Taliban tried to take Kunduz and Faryab, other provincial capitals, the reaction of the Afghan government and the Americans has been simply to try and hold on to population centers and vitally keep the roads open, because if the roads shut down, then garrisons are isolated and they become relatively much easier to be attacked by the Taliban. So what we are seeing now is actually a failure of even that policy. If population centers are being attacked with such brutality and with such force and with such large numbers of insurgents, then clearly even that strategy of protecting the civilian population is futile. We don't know in Ghazni how many civilians have been killed, but I'm sure there are many, many have been killed. At the moment, all we are getting are figures for, and these are very doubtful, but figures for military personnel who have been taken into hospitals and are being looked after.
Finally, Imran Khan is about to become the next Prime Minister of Pakistan. What significance does that carry for what is happening in Afghanistan? Will him being at the helm in Pakistan have any impact on the war in Afghanistan?
Well, unfortunately, my information is that, despite the promises made by Pakistan that they would be helping the peace process and they would be calming the Taliban and leading them into and helping them get into the peace process. Remember that the Taliban leadership is based in Pakistan, and there have been very severe differences between Pakistan and NATO and the Americans because of the support that in the past has been given to the Taliban by Pakistan. Now, obviously, this huge offensive with the supply lines that the Taliban seem to have constructed without anybody knowing about them all point the finger to regional allies of the Taliban who may well have been helping them get supplies. And that is not just Pakistan, but also Iran, which has been closely involved in a dialogue with the Taliban, and Russia. Russia, in order to protect Central Asia, has also been talking to the Taliban. So unfortunately, there's a complete lack of regional solidarity. And that's something that the Americans and NATO and other players should have been carrying out on behalf of the Afghan government to make sure that the regional countries are playing ball. And we're not seeing that happen at all.
Why do you think that is?
Well, I think, I mean, everybody's playing a double game. I mean, Iran says it is anti-Taliban and it is anti-extremism, but they're talking to the Taliban and helping the Taliban. Some of the Taliban leaders are living in Iran. Pakistan, of course, continues to say we are helping the peace process and trying to push the Taliban into talks with the Afghan government, and we are helping the Americans. And they are, because the American supply line goes through Pakistan and into Afghanistan. That is the supplies which support the American presence in Afghanistan of about 13,000, 14,000 troops. Russia too says it wants peace and stability in Afghanistan, but it has been supporting the Taliban. According to US intelligence, the Russians have been giving night vision goggles to the Taliban and other sophisticated armaments. Now, if that is the case, then we really do have a very serious regional problem where none of the regional countries are really playing fair and square with the Afghan government or with the Western alliance.
And continuing to treat Afghanistan as the basically site for a proxy war between all these different powers has been the case for the last 4 decades, at least.
Yeah, I mean, this war, remember, has been going on since 1979, when the Russians invaded Afghanistan. It's the longest war in anyone's memory. 3 times as long as the Second World War, and certainly the longest war that the Americans have ever faced. And unfortunately, what has really been missing in the last part of this war, in other words, since 9/11, has been a real attempt at regional diplomacy, bringing the regional countries together, putting pressure on the Taliban and the government to talk. The Americans are talking about peace talks without really having any political or geopolitical strategy in the region. Where are the American diplomats who should be moving from country to country to win over the support of the regional countries towards the peace process? None of that is really happening. And I think, that is going to in fact, what we're seeing is the Taliban are moving around much faster. A Taliban delegation has just been to Uzbekistan in Central Asia just a few days ago, opening up relations with Uzbekistan. They've been in China, in trying to improve relations with China. They've been in Iran. So, and these were the publicly announced delegations that have gone to visit these countries, not what is happening under the carpet.
Ahmed Rashid, journalist and best-selling author, thanks very much. And thank you for joining us on The Real News.